Hi everyone, and welcome again to Yesterday Today Sewing, where I take the fashions of past years, make them up, incorporate them in my everyday wardrobe. And today I'm starting a new project because it is summer, it is warm, and a lot of the recent projects I've done have been 3/4 sleeve, and I need more shorter sleeve type arrangements. So that is what I am planning. Now, in thinking about what I'm going to do, I went back over a few of the decades I've looked at recently, and hello! I just keep getting drawn back to the 1930s. If you think about what would have been happening around then, they're in the Great Depression, so they've come out of the extravagance of the 1920s and they're getting a bit more simpler. But in getting simpler, they're getting cleverer, I think, in how they style their dresses. They're using clever seaming, interesting darts and pleats. They're using the female figure to make the clothing quite interesting. And they're using newer materials like rayon with lovely patterns in it to make their clothing interesting. So I thought that's what I would be giving a go. Now, I got online and I have discovered a lovely lady called, I think, Jo Hedwig, something or another, on Flickr, has uploaded a complete Summer of 1938 Sears and Roebuck catalogue. And it is really interesting research because you can see sort of what everyday women would have been buying and wearing, and not just women, but men and kids as well. But I, of course, was particularly interested in the women's fashion. So as I was going through it, I came up with two particular designs that I was really, really into. First was this page of dresses. I really loved the simple styles, the elegance of the skirt, the prettily puffed sleeves, even the sort of different contrast in the collar here, and also just the simplicity of the patterns. I mean, a polka dot or just a very simple geometric pattern. And I thought, well, I've actually got a bit of fabric in rayon that evokes sort of this feel. So I'm looking somewhere, thank you, Laurie, along this sort of line. But the other thing I then discovered as part of this, what did you do with this, Laurie? Yeah, is this lovely dress. I really like it because in the plain fabric you can really see the design lines on it. But interestingly, this was marketed as a many ways dress. Yeah, thank you, Laurie. And I think what that means is you can adjust the neckline, and then they sold other accessories to sort of go with it. So you either had this high rounded neckline, or you could fold it in and make it into this lovely V neckline. And I thought, well, that could be quite interesting. On another page, which I haven't printed off, it shows sort of contrast collars that you can then add to this, or other ways of dressing it up with a contrast belt rather than the same fabric belt, and a few other little bits and pieces. So I thought, well, maybe this will be the way to go. So thank you, Laurie. So that is what I am going to do. I'm going to try draft this up. I think I could go for this sort of a skirt, but I could probably just reuse the skirt I made for my other 1930s dress because it will be a similar fullness and length to this. But what I need to do is work out, if I'm going to have this sort of convertible style collar, how might they have done it? Because it's obviously not buttoned together. So is it hook and eye? Is it press studded? What do they do to do this? So I tried to expand the picture to see what it might be. I really can't work it out. I've Googled an awful lot, and who knows how they make it. But in researching it, one thing that I came across is that by the 30s, they were really in love with the zipper. zips were a very new thing, and you start to see all sorts of advertising exclaiming how many zips it has in this dress. You know, it'll be one zip to do it up, it'll be 2 zips on the pocket, there'll be another zip here, there and everywhere. So maybe by this time they might be using a zip to make that sort of a convertible neckline. So failing anything else, I might bank on using a zip, probably an invisible zipper for that neckline, and see how that goes. I will keep researching as I work on it, but in my head I'm going to bank on that. Of these 2 options, I'm probably more closely going to be going with this paler version. So look at making it waisted rather than going with this high waist here. I love these darts from the waistline. I'm going to do some shirring again like I did on my other one. And I'm also rather liking this sort of sleeve with the puff at the top and maybe a little pleat at the bottom. So that is what I think I'm going to do for my next summer dress. What I have to make it out of is, I've only got the scraps here at the moment, but I picked up this lovely rayon from Spotlight and it was on a clearance, so only $6 a metre. So I picked up a pile of it. I'll have plenty. I've used a little bit already for a different project, but I don't think this will take much more than 2.5 to 3 metres, so I should have no problems making it out of this lovely stuff. And I think that'll turn into quite a useful, interesting 1930s style dress. So come and join me as I work on this interesting idea of a 1930s many ways dress. So I'm not going to bore you with all of the details about how I drafted this dress. If you're interested, head down to the link to my blog below and I'll have more of the details there if you want to follow along. And here it is, all laid out. I didn't actually bother with a mock-up for this one. I'm just crossing my fingers and hoping for the best. No. Have I mentioned Laurie loves pins? I call this game Protect the Pins. I don't know if she loves it or hates it. So anyway, after removing Laurie, I was able to get all of the marking done. The pleats came together really easily. In retrospect, I may not have made the pleats quite so long. Being quite low busted, it does accentuate my bust a bit, and possibly having the pleats a bit shorter would be more flattering. Here with the skirt, you can see I'm doing a French seam. If you're not familiar with them, I've used them in other videos. But just remember, first pass with a very narrow seam, have it wrong sides together, then turn it, iron it, do another narrow seam with the right sides together, and you get a beautifully contained sleeve. Oh, hello. See, Laurie thinks it's pretty good. She's always there for quality control. Finally, I get to do some hand sewing. This is for the shirring at the shoulder. I'm not using an elastic thread. I'm just using a slightly thicker than normal thread to try and give it a bit more detail, and doing a running stitch. And trying to keep it as even as regular for each layer that I do. Again, in retrospect, with the pattern of the fabric, you really don't notice that shirring there. So I probably would have held off shirring for a plain dress. And yes, I'm hand sewing the zip. I find invisible zippers really hard to do on my machine because I don't have an invisible zipper foot. So I just find this much easier to do by hand, to roll the edge of that zipper over so that you get the nice neat finish that you do with an invisible zip. This zip, I think, is the one for the neckline, but I'll also have to do one for the side seam of the dress. But hey, I've never minded hand sewing. I feel very zen. What you can see me doing here is just a tiny little bar tack, just to protect the end of the zip when it gets to the base of the zip. I find it can really pull the fabric there, so a small tack protects it really, really well. Alright, so where are we up to? Thank you, Laurie. So I probably showed you with a lot of my train sewing what I've got done, which is all of this shirring here on the shoulders. I finished off rather nicely all of these tucks at the bottom here, and as you saw, I hand sewed in this zip. I've finished off that seam there, but I haven't finished the edges here because I'll be putting a facing on here. So that is probably my next step now, to get that facing, which is what I've done here. I've finished all of that off, so now I can machine sew around the neck, and then I will probably be hand sewing this to the zip, is kind of the plan. Problem is, Laurie is rather enjoying playing with this zip in there. I kind of hate to ruin her fun, really. Hey, Laurie. Truth is, facings are never my favourite thing to sew. I'd much prefer to have a properly lined dress, but being a summer dress, it's not feasible to do that. So facing it is, when Laurie's finished playing. Here I'm just understitching to help the lining sit nicely. Basically moving the seam over to the facing side and doing a little top stitch. So with the facing on, I've now just got to finish the edge of the facing to the zipper. And look, this is a perennial problem when it comes to hand sewing. I always cut my thread far too long, and it keeps trying to bunch up and knot itself as I pull it through. Note to self, cut thread shorter. Makes life so much easier. Right, so bodice here is pretty much together. The skirt is also pretty much together. I won't put bodice to skirt just yet because I think I will do the sleeves first, then attach the skirt, put in the zip. So this is what my sleeve pattern looks like. Now, I'd originally thought I would have one pleat at the bottom and then gather at the top. However, in the picture it does look like it's pleated, so I'm half thinking, well, do I put 3 to 5 pleats along here and the one there? Big problem is I haven't measured the armholes, so I don't know exactly how much I would have to take in for the pleats. I might be able to find the sort of spread when I spread out the pattern to give the extra fullness. I might be able to look there and sort of get a feel for how much I should pleat. The other thing I thought I could do, if I pleat there, I could actually do shirring at the bottom here to match the shirring that I've got at the shoulder. So I have some thinking to do. I think the easiest, and I'm all for easy, would be to just do the one pleat and do the gathers. And there is a lot to be said for that. The gathers there will match the bit of gather at the shirring up there, and the pleat down there will match the pleats at the bottom of the thing. So it's probably design-wise not a bad way to go as well. So we have sleeves, and what I ended up doing on these was sewing the single box pleat at the bottom and gathering at the top, and I quite like the look actually. I think it was the right move to make. I will be hand stitching down that facing. So I have tried it on, it fits, which is always a bonus. I wasn't going to show you it though, because without, well, a skirt on it, it was not a good look to put on video. So I think it is time, oh hello, here she is. I think it is time now to get the skirt on. So sew the skirt at the waistline. I will have to finish off that seam before I put the zip into the side seam, because I won't be able to finish off that waist seam once the zip goes in, or at least it'll be exceedingly difficult. So that will be probably it for today then, and tomorrow it'll probably be a lot of hand sewing. So yep, hand sewing it is. This is me trying to do a faux French seam or a mock French seam around the armhole. If you're wondering how I do that, I've laid it out a bit more in my 70s rayon dress video. You can look it up there as well. I find this just a really, really neat way to finish off the armhole seam. But of course it is a bit fiddly. But hey, I'm sitting on a train. I've got time to spare. One thing you'll notice is different from the 70s dress with the way I'm doing it here. I'm just using a small running stitch on the seam, whereas I overcast. I probably prefer overcast in retrospect, but this works fine. And hey, it's quick. I don't do all of my hand sewing on the train, but when I try and do it at home, it always takes a lot longer, precisely because of this little one. She wants to help, kind of. See, she's very helpful. As I don't have anybody around who will help me straighten the hem of my skirt, well, anybody but Laurie, and she's not terribly good. She's better at taking out pins than putting them in. I use my dressmaker's dummy and it does a pretty good job. It's not quite as perfect as if I got Mum to do it, but it works. And at least having done that, I can now sit on the train and very quietly, very comfortably sew my hem. Right, so there we go. Now that I've got that side zip in here, I can check the general fit and cut of the dress. And yes, it does indeed fit, which is always a big bonus. The sleeves I like that. And then the other thing to think about is this neckline. Now this was called a many ways dress precisely because what you are meant to be able to do is change your neckline. So with this zip that I've got at the front here, I could choose to tuck that in, and I guess I would probably use like a press stud there or something like that, and make this a V-neck. Now the thing I'm noticing with this is it wants to roll rather than sit really flat, but looking at the pictures from the magazines, often when they would then do this to their neckline, they would use a collar or a scarf or something to accentuate this as well. And I think if you were to put a few more press studs that could be used, it would sit probably a bit better. But first things first, I'm going to keep it as this high neck like that, and make myself just a Peter Pan collar and see how that goes. Right, so here's the instructions I'm following for the collar. Basically you put the front to the back, have a bit of an overlap, then draw in the collar. I think, I'm going to do it with my facing pieces because they are not as big, which makes it easier. So what I will do, get rid of the seam allowance and give it, I don't know if you can see that properly, but just a bit of an overlap there, and stick it down. I'm assuming that'll be about an inch by the time we get there. Basically, the greater this overlap, the greater this roll that you'll have at the back of the collar. And I don't want it completely flat. A bit of a roll looks nice. So apparently that's what I do. And then I just draw the collar at the required width. I decide if I want a rounded collar or a pointy collar. I think I'll round it for this one. Then I just have to think how wide I want that collar. So what I need though is a scrap of paper so that I can actually trace this out. Again, this took a few goes, so I won't bore you with watching me do it all. Look to the blog below and it'll give you an idea how to draft one of these yourself. Right, so here we go. My first attempt at a Peter Pan collar. These traditionally sit pretty flat with very little roll. I thought this might get a bit of roll at the back, but I'm not seeing a lot. I probably should have cut the curve slightly differently. But with a bit of ironing perhaps, that might sit properly. I might also have to put press studs in to hold this. But, you know, a collar like this, I think, gives it a really cute sort of 30s look. You don't see these sort of Peter Pan collars around much these days, so it really does sort of help to date it. Now, the other thing I did notice is that in one of the pictures where they had put this sort of a Peter Pan collar with the high neck version of the dress, they'd also done white cuffs to go on the sleeves. So maybe after I've hemmed the sleeves, I might also have to think about making a little bit of a white cuff and seeing how that looks. This is just so very 30s. I really do like this. So I might play with this collar a bit, and then I might also make up something like a Peter Pan collar in this material. and then I might think about experimenting with doing something more v-neck. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so for the second, I am going to try more of this sort of a shirt collar type arrangement. So it seems fairly easy. Instructions are fairly clear. I'll just have to decide how long I want to make the point. So it'll be somewhere between these two that I'm doing. I picked up this bendy ruler recently. It comes in really handy for these sorts of things, making sure the collar matches up with the neckline and all of that. I highly recommend getting one if you're going to try this. So which is your favourite look? I can never decide which way I prefer it. Definitely with one of the collars. At the moment I'm wearing the white Peter Pan because I have to say that's one of my favourites. That bit of white brings a bit of brightness to the face and I just love that. And yep, a hat always makes everything better. For this one, I just used a fit shoe that I'd made for a costume, but it really worked. So there you go. That's my 1930s many ways dress. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you might be inspired to do something similar. So thanks for joining me, and hope to see you again really soon.